Hi everybody, it's Leslie from Your Yummy Tummy Chef, and today we are going to be making lentil soup. So, it's kind of one of those days. It's sort of gray and cloudy and a little bit cold. So that's definitely a soup day. And lentil soup is one of those soups that you just throw everything in the pot and it cooks by itself practically. So easy soup, doesn't take long, and it's delicious tasting. At least my recipe is delicious tasting. And yours will be too, right? Okay. For this recipe, we need about, it's a serving size of 3 to 5 cups, depending on how much water you put in your soup. But it's approximately that. Anyway, we need a couple of carrots that are peeled and diced, which we have right here. See? A celery stalk or two, and twice the amount of onion. So that is actually called a mirepoix. And a mirepoix is 50% onion and 1/4% of carrots and 1/4% of celery. That is the definition of mirepoix. We're also going to use 2 cloves of garlic, minced, and a cup of lentils, and I like to put some tomato product in mine. I'm using diced tomatoes. These are fire roasted. Very cool, right? And a little bit of salt. I'm adding to this recipe some some kale, and a drop of vinegar, which adds a little bit of like sweet and sourness to it. And in the end, I'm also going to be using a teeny bit of ketchup. That's my secret ingredient to making lentil soup. It tastes so good. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves. One was already rolled up. And the other one. And let's get started. We're going to start cooking, and the first thing you need to know when you're cooking and sauteing is that you need to have a high flame so your pan or your pot gets nice and hot. So the way you know that it's getting nice and hot is when your oil is so hot that when you put something in it, it sizzles. So I'm just going to give this like about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to throw in my garlic. Actually, I'm going to throw in my carrots and my celery. So it's getting there. Also, when it's hot, your oil tends to be kind of loose and runny. See how that's kind of loose? Before it would have been thicker and would have taken its time to go down the pot. Okay, so I'm going to throw in my carrots. Hear that? It's sizzling. And my celery. I'm going to cook this for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes or so. Get off of there. And then just let it simmer, let it cook down. You want to cook these veggies until they're kind of sweated, which means they can soften up a little bit. But not to worry, if you don't, by the time you put the broth in and the water and the lentils and it starts cooking, they'll soften up already. But what you're doing here, especially with the carrots, because the carrots are sweet by nature, but when you put heat on them, they start to exude a little bit of what is called caramelization. Caramelization. That's a tough word to say. Which makes it a little bit sweeter. In fact, when you put the onions in, that's exactly what you want to have happen. You want them to brown a little bit and certainly sweat somewhat. Become translucent. Not transparent, translucent. Big difference. So you can see this is starting to get a little bit cooked now. I'm going to add my garlic. Use my finger here to throw that in. Now I'm going to have garlic fingers. Give that a little toss around. If I were doing this in a pan, I'd be lifting the pan and flipping all these vegetables, but since I'm doing it in a pot, can't do that as easily, especially because there's two handles on here. These are very aromatic veggies. Okay, now it's time to put in our onions. Come on, everybody get in there. I'm going to saute that a little bit. I'm going to lower my flame just a bit. It doesn't need to be this high, and I don't want anything to burn, so I'm definitely going to lower it. But I do want these guys to cook. I failed to mention that you need 1 3/4 cups of beef broth and about maybe 4 cups of water. Perhaps I would say, 4 cups of water. That'll do it. Depends how liquidy you want your soup to be. The lentils do puff up when they're cooked. They don't remain the same teeny tiny size. As you can see right now, that is like, you can't even see it. You see how little that is? Okay, so these look pretty good. I mean, you see that? How it's nice and getting a little bit browned? Okay. Alright. I'm also adding to this some kale. You can add spinach if you want. I'm just adding kale because I happen to have some around. Soups are one of those things where if you feel like it, whatever you have in your pantry or in your fridge and you want to get rid of, just throw it in. As long as you do this first, if you saute things first in your pan, then you add your broth, then you're good to go. And this is turning the heat up just a little bit. By the way, I used cooking spray in here and a teeny bit of olive oil. I use cooking spray just because it's less fat and don't need all that fat in our lives too much. You need some fat, but not a lot of fat. Okay, that's looking good. And now I'm going to add my lentils. Now, remember what I said, that these lentils were rinsed and washed. And the reason why you do that is because when they come out of the bag, sometimes there's little bits of, you could find pebbles actually, but there could be some kind of granular stuff that just is not a lentil. So you just wash it kind of thoroughly, and I use that in a strainer like this, and I kind of just mix my hands around, make sure they're clean. I'm going to dump these in. Then I'm going to add my beef broth. Hear that? It's sizzling. That means that pan is hot. And then I'm going to add my water. So essentially what I've just put in there is about 5 3/4 cup of liquids. The next thing I'm going to add is my tomato product. My bay leaf. There goes the bay leaf. And this is a 14.5 ounce can of tomatoes, diced tomatoes. You can see the little brown bits because it's fire roasted, right? So I'm going to add not the whole can, but like a half a can. You can gauge that for yourself. Look, see? Half a can. Well, maybe a little more. Okay. I like my lentil soup to have a little bit of texture to it, besides the lentils and the veggies. So there you have it. And the next thing we're going to do is just add a teeny bit of salt. And I'm only adding a little bit now because the way you make soup is at the end you actually test it for flavor, and if it needs salt and pepper, well then by all means you should put it in at the end. But if you put it in the beginning and you put in too much, it's going to intensify once it's cooking. However, if you wait to the end, you can adjust that. So we don't want to put it in the beginning. I just put a little bit in, just so I can sort of taste what it needs to be tasted. And then what I am going to do now is I'm going to turn my heat up so that this comes to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, then you cover it and you reduce the heat to just, well, the lowest setting possible, so that it simmers. And there we're going to let it simmer for a good 20 minutes. And then it's done. And then you eat it. It's delicious. So I'm waiting for it to boil. And you know what they say, a watch pot never boils. But you'll see, it will boil eventually. I'm just not going to film it to the point where it boils. We'll come back to this at a later time and see how it comes out. Here you have it. It is boiling like crazy. This is called a rolling boil, and it is rolling. So I am now going to turn it down to a simmer, where you can see it is just mildly simmering. Sometimes you get this little, it's called, I forget what you call it, but you get this kind of foam coming in here. And you can just scoop that away, but I'll do that at the end. Well, no, I'll do it right now. You skim it off with this special tool called a skimmer. See, it's very flat. And you can just kind of skim off this. It's called scum. I know that's not very nice sounding. Actually, I don't really even see any. So I'm just going to stir it with this. Give it a nice little stir so that everything starts getting, but look how colorful it is. It's so beautiful, isn't it? Anyway, it's going to get even nicer. And it's going to get thicker. So I'm going to just let it simmer like that. I'm going to cover it up again. And there you have it.